Imagine living with unshakable peace, where nothing and no one has the power to disturb you, where criticisms, offenses, and problems stop stealing your calm sounds. Impossible, doesn't it? But the Stoics achieved it, while the world reacted with anger and frustration. They maintained serenity, not because they didn't feel emotions, but because they learned to master them today. I will reveal how you can do the same. If you apply these teachings, you will never again be irritated or bothered by anyone. Not because the world has changed, but because you will have changed before we begin. Go to the comments and write, "Today begins my best version. I am stoic with this." You commit to taking control of your mind and living with discipline. Let's begin. If you're ready to transform your life through the ancient wisdom of Stoicism, then subscribe to Stoic Forge right now. Hit that notification bell and join thousands of others on this journey to mental strength and inner peace. Your future self will. And thank you for it. Number 1, the destructive nature of anger. Anger is one of the most destructive emotions the human being can experience. It not only harms those around us, but also corrodes us from within, weakening our mind and dragging us toward decisions we will sooner or later regret. The Stoics considered it one of the greatest threats to virtue, because when anger takes control, we stop being rational and become slaves to our impulses. It is not a sign of strength, but of weakness, proof that we have lost dominion over ourselves. Anger resembles an uncontrollable fire. It begins with a spark, perhaps a misinterpreted word, an action we consider unjust, or an unexpected obstacle. If we feed it with ruminating thoughts, it grows rapidly until it becomes a flame that devastates our mental clarity, our relationships, and our well-being. Marcus Aurelius warned that the best way to combat anger is to prevent it from being born. If we learn to recognize its first signs, we can extinguish it before it consumes us completely. The consequences of anger are devastating. Beyond causing unnecessary conflicts, it affects our health. Science confirms what the Stoics already knew. Anger raises blood pressure, weakens the immune system, and can trigger cardiovascular problems. It is not just a momentary emotion, but a poison that, if allowed to grow, destroys both body and mind. Epictetus taught that it is not external circumstances that disturb us, but rather our interpretation of them. If someone insults us, it is not the insult that hurts us, but the importance we give to it. Learning to control our perception is the first step to mastering anger. When we let ourselves be carried away by anger, our actions become irrational. In the heat of the moment, shouting, insulting, or even breaking something may seem justifiable. But when the storm passes, we realize we have only made the situation worse. An attack of anger can destroy relationships that took years to build. An impulsive comment can leave wounds that may never heal completely. Seneca said that anger is like momentary delirium, a state in which we lose control over our words and actions. If we observe ourselves carefully, we will see that most of our angry reactions are disproportionate and illogical. Imagine an argument with a loved one in the heat of the moment. Harsh words seem necessary, but after everything calms down, we realize we could have handled the situation with more wisdom. Most problems can be solved with dialogue and patience, but anger blinds us and prevents us from reasoning. Instead of seeking solutions, we seek revenge, and with this, we only feed a cycle of resentment and pain. The Stoics teach us that the best way to combat anger is through self-discipline and reflection. Marcus Aurelius recommended remembering that life is short and that most of the problems that enrage us are insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Seneca suggested practicing patience and indifference. In the face of provocations, true strength is not in reacting with violence, but in maintaining calm when everything around seems to want to take us out of control. Anger is an internal enemy, a beast that, if not tamed, can consume us. But the good News is that we can train our mind not to be dragged by it the next time you feel anger arising. Stop and ask yourself if it's really worth it. Remember, nothing external has power over you unless you allow it. Peace is not in the absence of provocations, but in the capacity to face them with equanimity and control. Number 2, all negative emotions arise from unmet expectations. Negative emotions do not arise from what happens, but from what we expected to happen and did not occur. Frustration, anger, sadness, resentment, all these feelings have a common root. The difference between reality and our expectations. When we believe the world should behave in a certain way, and this doesn't happen, we feel betrayed, but in reality, the failure is in us. In the distorted image we created in our mind, we cling to an illusion, and when reality destroys it, instead of adapting, we react with suffering. We get irritated because people don't act as we would like, because the results are not what we expected. Because life doesn't follow the script we wrote in our mind, we believe we deserve certain treatments, certain successes, certain paths without obstacles, but the world doesn't follow our rules. Frustration doesn't come from the event itself, but from the shock between what we desired and what really happened. Seneca said that we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. What hurts us most is not what happens, but our interpretation of the facts. If we learned to accept events without resistance, we would avoid much of the unnecessary suffering. Imagine someone who believes their partner would never betray them because that's how it should be. This person builds an expectation based on their own vision of what is correct. But if betrayal happens, the pain doesn't come from the act itself, but from the contrast with the idealized image they had created. Instead of accepting reality as it is, they fight against it in their mind, and this internal conflict transforms into suffering. Another example is the person who expects their friends to always be available, that traffic will be fluid, that their boss will value their effort. When any of this doesn't happen, they feel disappointment and anger because they assumed the world should follow their rules. The Stoics teach us that the key to inner peace is eliminating unrealistic expectations. This doesn't mean resignation, but rather understanding that the world owes us nothing. We cannot control the behavior of others, nor external events, only our reaction to them. Epictetus said we should accept what happens as if we had chosen it, because resisting reality only generates suffering. If we stop expecting people to treat us in a certain way, we accept that they can fail us and that life doesn't follow a predictable path. We eliminate much of the stress and frustration. Accepting reality as it is doesn't mean we shouldn't have goals or desires, but rather that we need to be prepared for any outcome we can strive to achieve something, but without clinging to the idea that it must happen exactly as we want, otherwise failure will destroy us. Disappointment doesn't come from life, but from our resistance to accepting its unpredictability. A Stoic understands that everything changes, that nothing is guaranteed, and therefore doesn't allow their emotions to be dictated by what is outside their control. If we eliminate rigid expectations, we stop demanding that the world adapt to our beliefs. Instead of getting frustrated when something goes wrong, we ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? Instead of feeling betrayed, we understand that people act according to their own nature, not the one we imagined for them. Peace is in flexibility, in the capacity to accept what comes without resistance. Happiness is not in making everything fit our expectations, but in learning to flow with reality without it stealing our tranquility. Number 3. Anger is a reflection of the ego. Anger is nothing more than a reflection of the wounded ego. When we feel that someone disrespects us, treats us unfairly, or doesn't recognize our value, we react with rage because we feel our identity threatened. We believe we deserve different treatment, that others should see us as we see ourselves. And when this doesn't happen, We feel that something sacred within us has been violated. But the truth is that anger doesn't arise from what others do, but from our interpretation of their actions. It is our ego that demands recognition, that gets offended, that needs to defend its image. If this ego weren't so inflated, if we didn't take things personally, anger would lose power over us when someone speaks to us rudely. Our first reaction is to think they are attacking us, but what if this person is simply having a bad day? What if their words have nothing to do with us, but rather with their own internal chaos? Reality is that most of the time, others' actions are not a reflection of us, but of themselves. However, the ego makes us believe everything revolves around us. We say, he disrespected me, he made me look bad, he didn't value me. But what would happen if we stopped seeing ourselves as the center of each situation? If we understood that others' behavior is a reflection of them, not us, we could free ourselves from anger. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that it is not what happens that disturbs us, but our opinion about what happens. If someone insults us, the insult itself has no power. Unless we give it meaning, we can decide to ignore it, see it as a reflection of the other person, and move on without allowing it to affect our peace. But the ego wants to fight, wants to defend, itself wants to prove it's right. And in this desire to protect our image, we fall into anger's trap. We lose control and act impulsively. But if someone's insult doesn't change who we are, if their attitude doesn't define us, why allow it to drag us into a state of uncontrol? A clear example happens in traffic when someone cuts us off. Our ego tells us it's disrespectful, that we need to react, that we can't allow them to treat us that way. But what if the other driver didn't even think about us? What if they're just stuck in their own world? Still, our ego transforms the situation into something personal, and with this, anger dominates our mind. If instead of reacting, we simply accepted what happens as a neutral fact, we would avoid this. Suffering the same applies to any other context at work, in relationships, in daily life. Our reaction is not caused by events themselves, but by the story we tell ourselves about them. The Stoics teach us that the key to controlling anger is recognizing the role the ego plays in it. If we strengthen our self-esteem, if we stop seeking external validation, if we understand that our value doesn't depend on how others treat us, we become immune to provocations. Seneca said that the best revenge is not to resemble those who wronged us. If someone treats us badly and we respond with anger, we are allowing them to control us. But if we maintain calm, if we choose not to enter that person's game, we demonstrate true strength. Anger is a reflection of an ego that hasn't yet learned to detach from others' opinions. But when we understand that others don't have the power to define us, that their words and actions say more about them than about us, we free ourselves. This doesn't mean accepting abuse or remaining silent in the face of injustice, but means learning to react with intelligence. Not emotion. Inner peace doesn't come from controlling others, but from controlling our reaction to them. When the ego stops being the center of our existence, anger loses its dominion over us. Number 4, forgiveness frees us from anger. Anger is a heavy burden we often carry without realizing it. We cling to resentment because we believe by doing so, we are punishing those who wronged us. But in reality, the only one punished is us. Anger consumes our peace, imprisons us mentally, and prevents us from moving forward. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is the key that opens this cell. It doesn't mean justifying what was done to us, nor forgetting naively, but rather freeing ourselves from the need to continue suffering for something that has already passed. Forgiving is not a gift for the other person. It is an act of self-love, an essential step to recover our tranquility when we cling to anger. We repeatedly relive the pain. Our mind becomes a battlefield where the past continues present, where we keep feeding what hurt us. But why this weight? Marcus Aurelius said that the best punishment for those who wronged us is not to resemble that person if someone betrayed us, offended us, or hurt us. Maintaining resentment only prolongs the control that person has over us. Forgiveness, on the contrary, returns power to us, allows us to let go of the weight and move forward without the past. Divining us. Resentment is a trap of the ego. It makes us believe that if we forgive, we are showing weakness, but the truth is the opposite. True strength lies in those who master their emotions, in those who choose to let go of what hurts them instead of clinging to it. Seneca taught that we should not allow anger to dictate our actions, because when we act with rage, we stop being masters of ourselves. If someone hurts us and we respond with rancor, we are giving that person power over our peace. But if we choose to forgive, we regain control of our mind and our well-being. Imagine someone who was betrayed by a close friend. The natural reaction is anger, disappointment, the desire for revenge. But how long can this feeling be sustained before it becomes a burden? Resentment doesn't affect the traitor. It affects those who carry it. Every time this person thinks about the betrayal, they relive the pain. But if they decide to forgive, if they accept that what happened cannot be changed and that the past should not define the present, they find freedom. Forgiving doesn't mean trusting again those who betrayed us. It means stopping allowing that betrayal to continue affecting us. Forgiveness is a conscious choice. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not always easy, but it's the path to inner peace. Epictetus reminded us that we have no control over what others do, only over our reaction if someone insults us. It's not the insult itself that hurts us, but the importance we give to it. By forgiving, we stop giving this importance. We understand that each person acts according to their own level of consciousness, and that their behavior reflects their internal world, not ours. This doesn't mean allowing abuse, nor accepting injustices, but learning to let go of the resentment that prevents us from living in peace. When we forgive, we don't free the other, we free ourselves. We stop carrying an unnecessary weight. We stop wasting energy on a conflict that only exists within our mind. True revenge is not in causing pain, but in demonstrating that pain didn't change us, that we move forward without letting anger consume us. Peace is not in waiting for others to repent, but in deciding that our happiness doesn't depend on their behavior. Forgiving is letting go of anger's poison and embracing the freedom that comes with serenity. Number 5, practice non-reaction. When something irritates us, when we feel provoked or attacked, our first reaction is impulsive, charged with emotion. We want to respond immediately. We want to defend ourselves. We want to prove we're right. But in that moment, our mind is not operating by reason, but by instinct. And that's when we make mistakes. We say things we later regret, and we worsen situations instead of solving them. The practice of non-reaction allows us to avoid this. It gives us control over our responses and protects us from the emotional wear that impulsive reactions generate. When we give ourselves a moment before responding, when we resist the impulse to act immediately, we gain power over ourselves. It's not about being indifferent or repressing our emotions, but rather training our mind so we're not slaves to them. Marcus Aurelius said that the best way to defend against an offense is not to resemble those who offended us. If someone insults or criticizes you harshly, reacting with anger is falling into that person's game, is allowing them to have power over you. But if you maintain calm and choose not to respond in the moment, you demonstrate that you have control and that your peace doesn't depend on others' attitudes. In daily life, opportunities to practice non-reaction are constant. A coworker makes an unpleasant comment, an aggressive driver cuts you off in traffic. A family member insists on arguing. In each of these moments, the decision is in your hands. React immediately and feed the conflict, or take a step back, observe the situation with detachment, and respond with intelligence. Epictetus taught that it's not what happens that affects us, but the way we interpret what happens. If someone criticizes you in a meeting and you see this as a personal attack, you'll feel anger and react defensively. But if instead you give yourself a moment, breathe, and analyze whether it's really worth responding, you can act with calm and professionalism without allowing emotion to control your behavior. Non-reaction is a demonstration of strength. Most people act by impulse, enslaved by their emotions. When someone irritates them, they react without thinking. They let anger take control, but true power lies in those who resist this first reaction, in those who understand. They don't need to prove anything to anyone, in those who choose when and how to act. Seneca reminded us that time is a great filter for emotions. What today seems an unforgivable offense, in a few days will lose importance. What now irritates us deeply in a few hours will seem insignificant. That's why not reacting immediately allows us to gain perspective. See the situation clearly before deciding how to act. Practicing non-reaction doesn't mean accepting everything in silence nor letting others walk all over us. It means acting by reason, not emotion. If something really deserves a response, the best response will be given with a calm mind. Instead of responding to fire with more fire, we respond with intelligence and equanimity. Not because we are weak, but because we understand that our peace is worth more than a senseless argument. Every time you feel the impulse to react, remember that you don't have to. You can let the emotion pass. You can observe it without being dragged by it, and when you do this, you'll notice something incredible. Conflicts will diminish, anxiety will reduce, and people who once provoked you will lose power over you. Non-reaction is the door to true freedom, the ability to decide how and when to respond without being a slave to external stimuli. Number 6. The relationship between low self-esteem and anger. Anger is often nothing more than a reflection of insecurity. When we are not at peace with ourselves, any comment, any look, any situation that challenges our self-image irritates us. It's not the situation itself that enrages us, but what it awakens within us. If someone criticizes us and this causes anger, the problem is not in the criticism, but in the importance we give to it. If we were secure in who we are, if our self-esteem was strong, we wouldn't need to react with anger. We would simply ignore when confidence is fragile. Any blow shakes our foundations, and we respond with rage as a defense mechanism. Insecurity creates a sense of vulnerability. We feel we must constantly protect our image, that we're being judged by others, that any negative comment is a threat. The mind interprets these situations as personal attacks and responds with aggressiveness. But the truth is that no one has the power to diminish us if we don't give permission for it. Epictetus said that we are not affected by what others say about us, but by the opinion we have about those words. If we believe we are weak, that we're not good enough, any criticism will reinforce this belief, and the immediate reaction will be anger. But if we have a solid image of ourselves, nothing external can disturb us. I remember a phase when I'd gained weight. Every comment about my appearance made me react with anger. I told myself it was because of others' lack of respect. But the truth is, I wasn't angry with them. I was angry with myself. I didn't like what I saw in the mirror, and any external observation only confirmed this. It wasn't their opinion that hurt me, but my own anger didn't come from them. It came from the insecurity I felt with time. I understood that the problem wasn't what others said, but my own lack of control over myself. Instead of spending energy reacting with anger, I decided to act. I worked on my health, my discipline, my mentality. And when I did this, the same comments that once bothered me stopped affecting me. Not because people had changed, but because I had changed. Low self-esteem makes us interpret reality in a distorted way. We believe others are constantly judging us, but in reality, the problem is not in the external world, but in how we see it. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that if something external disturbs us, the problem is not in the thing itself, but in our judgment about it. If someone says something that offends you, ask yourself, why does this affect me? Is it because deep down I fear it might be true? Is it because I have doubts about myself? Most of the time, the answer is yes. Anger is a defensive reaction to insecurity. When we strengthen our self-esteem, anger loses its power over us. We become less reactive, more serene, more focused on what really matters. We don't need to prove anything to anyone, because we already know who we are. Others' opinions stop being a threat, because our value doesn't depend on their approval. The Stoics teach us that true strength is not in imposing our will on others, but in governing ourselves. Anger is a sign that something within us is not yet resolved. Instead of reacting impulsively, we can use these moments as indications of what we still need to work on within ourselves. Every time you feel anger over a comment or situation, stop for a moment. Ask yourself if it's really the comment that bothers you, or if there's something deeper behind it. Use anger as a mirror to see the aspects of yourself that still need to be strengthened. When you improve your self-esteem, when you take responsibility for your life, anger becomes unnecessary. There's no longer insecurity to protect. There's no longer fear to hide. Only the calm of someone who knows themselves, who accepts themselves, and who doesn't need to react to what doesn't define them. Number 7. The importance of living with purpose. When you don't have a clear purpose, life seems empty, chaotic, directionless. You wake up every day without a real reason to move forward, without something that motivates you. Beyond routine, and this sense of emptiness generates frustration. Lack of purpose makes people irritable, reactive, always on the defensive. Any inconvenience, any obstacle seems bigger than it really is, because there's nothing bigger to focus on. Without direction, the mind fills with noise and disorder, and in this state, it's easy to fall into anger and resentment. The Stoics understood that the key to mental peace is having a purpose aligned with our values, something that makes our existence have meaning. When you live without a defined purpose, everything becomes a distraction. Traffic bothers you, others' words irritate you, you feel life is unfair, but when you have a purpose, these same things lose importance, not because they stop existing, but because your focus is on something greater. Marcus Aurelius said that each person should ask themselves, what am I here for? What really matters in my life? When you have a vision, the small frustrations stop controlling you. You don't waste time reacting to every provocation because your energy is concentrated on something significant. There was a time in my life when I had no direction. I felt trapped in a meaningless routine, doing things that didn't fulfill me, and the consequence was constant irritability. Anything bothered me. Any problem seemed enormous because I had no real reason to get up in the mornings. I lived on autopilot, letting circumstances dictate my mood. But when I found my purpose, everything changed. I decided to focus on creating content, on sharing ideas that could help other people, on building something that made sense to me. And when I did this, I realized that problems that once seemed unbearable were now just part of the path. I no longer got irritated by small things because I had a bigger vision. Anger stopped being a habitual reaction because there was something more valuable to focus on. The Stoics teach us that purpose is not something you find, but something you define. You don't need to wait For life to deliver a purpose to you, you must create it for yourself. Epictetus said that each person has the responsibility to decide what they want to become and what they want to offer the world. It's not about waiting for inspiration, but taking, action-seeking, what really makes us feel alive. When you discover your purpose and work on it, your mind changes, frustration diminishes because you don't worry so much about what you can't control. You don't need external validation. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You simply do what you know you must do, and this brings satisfaction. When you live with purpose, life stops seeming like a succession of problems and becomes a journey. You no longer react with anger to every obstacle, because you understand that challenges are part of the path. Each day has meaning. Each action contributes to something greater. And when this happens, peace becomes a natural state. Not because everything is perfect, but because you decided where to focus your energy. There's no room for anger when you're busy building something that really matters. If you feel that life frustrates you, if you notice you react too easily, ask yourself if you really have a clear purpose. Ask yourself if you're dedicating your time to something that fulfills you, or if you're just passing the days without direction. The difference between a life full of frustration and a life full of meaning lies in this answer. Find what motivates you, what makes you wake up every morning wanting to move forward. And when you do this, you'll see how anger loses its power over you when you have a purpose. Everything else becomes background noise. Number 8, reprogram your emotional response. The brain is not stuck to a single way of reacting. Thanks to neuroplasticity, we can train it to respond differently to situations that once provoked anger or frustration. The idea that we are this way and cannot change is a lie. We tell ourselves the brain is malleable, and just like a muscle can be strengthened in certain areas, depending on how we train it. If every time something irritates us, we respond with anger, we are reinforcing this neural connection and making anger an automatic reaction. But if we learn to respond with calm over time, this will be our brain's new programming. When we face a situation that would normally make us explode, our instinct is to follow the pattern. If someone insults us, if something doesn't go as we expect, if someone acts disrespectfully, the immediate reaction is the one we've reinforced over the years. But here's the key. If we consciously force ourselves to respond differently, we are creating a new neural pathway. At first, this feels forced, uncomfortable, even false. But with repetition, the brain begins to accept this new response as normal, and eventually calm becomes our automatic reaction. I remember once when my dog destroyed an object I valued, my habitual reaction would have been to get irritated, raise my voice, feel that internal explosion of frustration. But in that moment, I decided to do something different. Instead of giving in to anger, I forced myself to breathe deeply and pet my dog. At first, it seemed like I was suppressing my emotion, but in reality, what I was doing was teaching my brain that not everything needs to be an anger response. I repeated this several times, every time my dog did something that would normally irritate me. With time, I noticed my natural response changed. I no longer felt that tension in my chest. I no longer needed to restrain myself, because my brain learned these situations weren't a threat and that anger wasn't necessary as a response. Neuroplasticity shows us we are not condemned to be prisoners of our emotions. We can redirect our impulses and make calm become our new normal every time we decide not to act with anger. We strengthen the neural connection of patience and equanimity, and the more we do this, the more natural it becomes. Marcus Aurelius said we cannot control what happens, but we can control our reaction to it. This is not just a philosophical principle, it's a scientific reality. The brain changes based on what we practice. If we practice serenity over time, it becomes our default response. This process doesn't happen immediately. At first, the mind will try to return to old patterns because it's what it knows, what seems familiar. But if we are persistent, if every time we feel anger growing, we force ourselves to stop, breathe and respond differently, we will see real change one day. We will realize that situations that once made us explode now seem insignificant. And not because we are repressing anger, but because our brain learned there's no reason to feel it. Anger is a habit just like calm. If we feed anger, it grows and strengthens. But if we ignore it and cultivate serenity, it weakens and disappears. It's not about pretending, but reprogramming our mind to function in a way that benefits us instead of harming us. If we want to be more tranquil people, more balanced, wiser in our responses, we need to practice this day after day, and with repetition will come the moment when calm will no longer be an effort. It will simply be who we are. Number 9. Love and gratitude overcome anger. Anger is an emotion that consumes, wears down, and makes us lose control of our own mind, but there are two forces capable of dissolving it. Love and gratitude. When we are trapped in anger, it's because our attention is focused on the negative, on what bothers us, on what we believe is wrong, on lack, on frustration, on injustice. But if instead we direct our mind to what we love and what we are grateful for, anger loses its power. Not because problems disappear, but because we stop giving them the energy necessary to continue affecting us. Love connects us with what really matters. If we are angry with someone, we can ask ourselves, do I prefer to win this argument or maintain this relationship? When we love someone, the need to prove we are right becomes secondary. Anger is selfish. It seeks revenge, seeks to prove a point. But love seeks to understand, seeks to build, seeks to unite. Often, we let ourselves be carried away by anger in trivial situations. We react without thinking and end up hurting the people we love most. But if in those moments we remember what we feel for them, if we take an instant to connect with love instead of anger, our response changes. Gratitude is also a powerful antidote. When we are grateful, there is no room for anger. We cannot feel resentment and gratitude at the same time. If something bothers us, we can stop and do a simple exercise. Think of 3 things we are grateful for in that moment. Maybe it's our health, a special person in our life, the opportunity to learn from the situation. This simple act changes the direction of our thoughts, takes us out of the reactive state and returns control to us. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations about the importance of remembering life's transience. If today were the last day with someone you love, would you really waste time feeling angry with that person? Gratitude reminds us that each moment is valuable and that anger is a waste of our time and energy. Some time ago, I decided to do a small experiment with myself. Every time I felt anger or frustration, instead of reacting as I normally would, I forced myself to think of something I was grateful for in that instant. At first, it seemed forced, as if I were ignoring reality, but over time I realized my mind began to do this automatically. One day, someone spoke to me with contempt, and instead of feeling irritated, the first thought I had was, I am grateful to have health and be able to continue advancing. This thought allowed me to respond with calm, without feeding the conflict, not because the other person deserved it, but because I deserved to maintain my peace. The Stoics understood that our emotions are not the result of what happens around us, but of what we decide to think about. What happens if we concentrate on injustice, on lack, on what irritates us? Anger grows. But if instead we focus on what we have, on what we love, on what we are grateful for, anger dissolves. It's not a mental trick. It's a way to train our mind to see reality from a higher perspective. Epictetus said that the secret of happiness is not in having more, but in desiring less. When we cultivate gratitude, we realize we already have enough. That we don't need to react with anger because life continues to be good despite small setbacks. We cannot avoid moments of tension nor control how others act, but we can decide which emotions we want to feed within us if we choose love and gratitude. Anger will not find space to grow when we love. We understand when we are grateful we let go, and in this daily practice, little by little we become more serene people, more centered and less prone to react with anger, not because the world has changed, but because we learn to see it differently. Number 10, establish healthy boundaries. If you don't establish boundaries, you allow others to decide how they will treat you. It's not about being conflictive nor rejecting others, but defining where. Your patience, your time and your energy end when you don't set clear limits. You send the message that it's okay to disrespect you, interrupt you constantly, not value your time. And when this happens, frustration grows, anger accumulates and you end up emotionally exhausted. But the responsibility to set boundaries is not others, it's yours. Only you can decide what you allow and what you don't allow. Often we tolerate certain behaviors out of fear of seeming selfish or unpleasant. We have difficulty saying no because we fear the other person will be offended or reject us, but the real problem is not saying no. It's not saying it when necessary. If someone constantly interrupts you at work, if a friend only seeks you when they need something, if a family member criticizes you without reason, is it really your responsibility to accept this? Seneca said, "We cannot control how others act, but we can control how we position ourselves before them if we allow them to treat us inadequately without reacting. We are giving permission for this to continue happening. When someone crosses a boundary and you don't impose a break, you are reinforcing this behavior. If someone criticizes you unfairly and you say nothing, that person assumes it's normal to treat you this way. But if you with calm and firmness establish that you don't accept this type of behavior, you are sending a clear message. You value yourself enough not to allow disrespect. You don't need to be aggressive nor argue. You just need to be clear. I will not tolerate this type of comment. My time is valuable. Please respect. I don't feel comfortable with this. Simple phrases like these can completely change the dynamic of a relationship. I remember a time when I allowed myself to be constantly interrupted no matter what I was doing. If someone wanted my attention, I would drop everything and attend. Initially, I thought this made me a good person, but over time I realized I was just allowing others' needs to be more important than mine. I felt frustrated, exhausted, but the fault was not others. I never set a boundary one day. I decided to change this. When someone interrupted me, I simply said, "I'm busy now, we'll talk later." At first, it was difficult, but little by little, others understood that my time was also important, and most surprisingly, I didn't lose any important relationships. On the contrary, I began to feel more respected. The Stoics understood that setting boundaries is not an act of rejection, but of self-respect. Epictetus said, "We should decide what is under our control and what is not. We cannot avoid someone trying to cross our boundaries, but we can decide how we react. If every time someone treats you badly, you allow it in silence, you are not being virtuous. You are abandoning your responsibility to protect your well-being." Saying no is an act of courage, not because it's easy. It shows, and respect yourself, and far from harming relationships, it means creating healthier ones where both know what to expect and what is acceptable. Often, people don't even realize they are crossing a boundary until someone tells them, "You cannot expect others to guess what bothers you. You need to communicate this," and if even after that there is no respect, then you need to ask yourself if this person should really continue being part of your life. Every time you choose not to establish a boundary out of fear of conflict, you are choosing internal conflict instead of external. You are choosing your own dissatisfaction just to avoid a difficult conversation, but avoiding the problem doesn't solve it. Learning to say no without guilt is one of the most valuable skills you can develop, not because it makes you stronger before others, but because it makes you stronger within yourself. Setting boundaries is not to control others, it's to protect your peace and live with dignity. Number 11. Not everything deserves your attention every day. We face provocations, unnecessary comments, insignificant problems that try to drag us into chaos. But reality is that most of these things have no real importance. We exhaust ourselves emotionally, reacting to the trivial, to what tomorrow will be irrelevant. We live in a world where everyone has opinions, where criticisms are constant, where minor problems can seem big if we don't learn to filter what really matters. The key to maintaining mental peace is understanding that not everything that happens around us deserves our energy. Every time something bothers you, stop a moment and ask yourself, does this really matter a month from now, a year from now? Will I even remember this? Most of the time the answer will be no. Yet we let ourselves be carried away by the emotion of the moment. We feel we need to defend ourselves to react. But when we observe things from life's perspective as a whole, we realize many of them are just distractions. Marcus Aurelius said that tranquility comes when we learn to ignore what doesn't concern us. If someone insults you on the street, does this really change something in your life? If a stranger criticizes you on social media, does this have an impact on who you are? Each provocation only distances us from what really matters. Imagine someone makes a rude comment about you. The immediate impulse is to respond, defend yourself, prove you're right. But what do you gain from this? Is it really worth investing your energy in this discussion? A comment doesn't define your value. A criticism doesn't change who you are. If every time someone says something negative about you, you react, you are delivering your peace to anyone who decides to provoke you. Epictetus taught us that we should not be slaves to others' opinions if something doesn't contribute to your growth. If it doesn't alter the course of your life, then it doesn't deserve your attention. Most of the worries we carry aren't even ours. We stress about what others think, about problems we cannot control, about expectations that don't even belong to us. We spend too much time worrying about what they will say, seeking others' approval, getting involved in situations that deep down don't affect our essence. But when we understand our energy is limited, we begin to be more selective with what we give importance. This doesn't mean being indifferent, but learning to differentiate what really deserves your effort and what is just noise. I remember a time when any criticism affected me. If someone questioned what I was doing, I felt the need to explain myself, to justify, to prove I was right. But over time, I realized this was a waste of energy. I learned to observe before reacting, to ask myself if it was really worth it. And most of the time, the best response was silence. Not because I had nothing to say, but because it simply wasn't necessary. Not everything requires a response. Not everything deserves a conflict. Not everything deserves your attention. Every time you choose to ignore what is not relevant, you are protecting your mental peace. You are training your mind to focus on what really matters, on what really transforms. The Stoics did not seek to control the world, but to control their response to it. If someone acts with malice, if someone tries to provoke you, remember, you have the option not to respond. Strength is not in winning all battles, but in choosing which battles are worth fighting when you filter what really matters.